Hey guys, and for our journey tonight, we're heading far, far away from the comforting glow of city lights. I want you to picture yourself standing on the prow of a small, sturdy boat, the air thick with the taste of salt and the chill of the North Atlantic. All around you is a churning, gray-green sea, and in the distance, a cluster of dark, jagged rocks emerges from the mist like ancient teeth. This is your destination. You are approaching the Flannan Isles, a place so remote, so battered by the elements, that the land itself seems to resent your presence. Tonight, we're not just visiting. We're stepping into a mystery that has remained unsolved for over a century. A story of a silent sentinel and the men who simply vanished from its watch. To be perfectly honest, if you were actually on that boat in December of 1900, you probably wouldn't survive this. The sea, the wind, the isolation, they don't take kindly to visitors. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what we do here. We'd also love to see where in the world you're retuning in from and what time it is. So drop your location and local time in the comments below. It's always a quiet comfort to know we're all sharing this story together from different corners of the night. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some gentle, ambient hum, and let's all just relax into our story for tonight. You step off the boat, and your boots find purchase on slick, seaweed-covered stone. The air here is different. It's heavy, saturated with the cries of thousands of seabirds, gannets, fulmars, puffins that wheel and dive from the towering cliffs above. The sound is incessant, a constant, wild symphony that underscores the profound, crushing loneliness of this place. This specific island is Eilean Mor, which means Big Isle in Scottish Gaelic. It's a bit of an optimistic name, really, as the entire island is little more than a windswept lump of rock and tough, wiry grass, barely a few acres in size. There are no trees to break the force of the wind, which howls around you like a living thing. You can feel it pushing against you, trying to unbalance you, a constant physical reminder that you are an intruder here. This place wasn't made for people. For centuries, the only regular inhabitants were the sheep that shepherds would ferry over for summer grazing, and even they were said to be wary of the island's strange atmosphere. In a time before modern navigation, these islands were a notorious hazard, a ship-killer's playground. Sailors would give them a wide berth, whispering tales of strange occurrences and the lingering spirits of those who had wrecked upon their shores. As you begin the slow, arduous climb up the steep, roughly hewn path that snakes up the cliff face, you can't help but feel a prickle of unease. It's more than just the isolation. The island seems to be watching you. Every shadow in the rock face looks like a watching eye. Every gust of wind sounds like a whispered warning. You look back at the boat, now a small toy bobbing on the restless sea, and a sliver of panic enters your mind. It's your only link to the world, to warmth, to safety. The path is treacherous, a series of steps carved directly into the rock, with a rusty iron handrail for support that feels colder than ice to the touch. The spray from the waves crashing against the base of the cliff, hundreds of feet below, reaches you even here, coating your face in a fine, salty mist. It's a place that demands respect, and perhaps a little bit of fear. It's easy to see why superstitions clung to these islands like lichen to a stone. For instance, a common historical fact is that the Flannan Isles are named after Saint Flannan, a 7th century Irish abbot and bishop who is said to have built a small chapel or oratory here. For centuries after, shepherds visiting the island would perform strange rituals, like circling the ruins of his chapel on their knees, to ensure good fortune and protection. They believed the place held a unique, and perhaps dangerous, sanctity. You pause for a moment to catch your breath, your lungs burning from the cold air and the exertion. The sheer scale of the landscape is overwhelming. The sky seems bigger here, the sea more infinite. The colors are muted gray rock, green-brown turf, the white foam of the waves, and the bruised purple of the clouds. It's a stark, brutal kind of beauty. But there's a strange, less-known piece of lore attached to this place. It was widely believed by the local communities on the nearby Isle of Lewis that you should never, ever kill a seabird on Eilean Moor. They were considered to be the carriers of the souls of the dead, particularly drowned sailors, and even some said, fallen angels who hadn't quite made it to heaven or hell. To harm one was to invite a terrible curse. It's a silly superstition, you might think, but standing here, with the birds screaming overhead and the wind moaning in your ears, it doesn't feel so silly at all. It feels like very, very good advice. It's the kind of place that would make even the most cynical person start looking for four-leaf clovers. Or in this case, just try not to anger the local avian population, which seems to have a pretty strong union. The air grows colder as you ascend, the wind more insistent. The path is a testament to the sheer effort required to even exist here. Every supply, every barrel of oil, every bag of coal, every letter from home had to be hauled up this very path. Historians still debate whether the pre-Christian inhabitants of the islands, rumored to be a mysterious people known as the Little People, left any lasting cultural impact on these superstitions, or if the tailies were simply born from the island's own oppressive atmosphere. It's a classic chicken and egg problem of folklore. Did the island's spooky vibe create the stories, or did ancient stories make the island feel spooky? Either way, as you near the summit, you feel a sense of both accomplishment and deep-seated dread. You are reaching the highest point of this lonely outpost, the very reason for this punishing climb. And as you take the final step onto the flat plateau at the top, you see it, standing stark and proud against the gray sky, a white tower, the beacon in the dark, the silent witness to our story. You stand before it now, the Flannan Isles Lighthouse. It's not an ancient, crumbling ruin. This is a monument to Victorian engineering and determination. Completed just a year before our story begins, in 1899, it's a pristine white tower, 75 feet tall, built of solid brick and stone, designed to withstand the worst the North Atlantic can throw at it. And the North Atlantic can throw a lot. You run a hand over the cool, slightly damp brickwork. It feels incredibly solid, an anchor of civilization in this wild, untamed place. The tower is a symbol of safety, a promise of guidance to sailors navigating these treacherous waters. Its purpose is singular and noble, to cast a powerful beam of light out into the darkness, cutting through fog and storm, warning ships away from the deadly rocks below. For the men on those ships, fighting through monstrous waves and blinding squalls, this light would be more than just a warning. It would be a glimmer of hope, a sign that they were not alone, a connection to the world of solid ground and safety. You could almost imagine the relief of a captain seeing that double flash every 30 seconds, confirming his position, saving his ship and his crew. It's the kind of job that has zero room for error. A forgotten password on your laptop is an inconvenience. A forgotten light here is a catastrophe. You walk around the base of the tower, past the adjoining living quarters, a sturdy, one-story building connected to the tower by a short, covered walkway. The entire complex is enclosed by a fixed stone wall, creating a small, protected courtyard against the ceaseless wind. Everything is meticulously planned and built for efficiency and endurance. This wasn't a project for the faint of heart. The construction itself was a Herculean task, led by a man from a dynasty of lighthouse builders, David Allen Stevenson. A common historical fact for you. David was the cousin of the famous author Robert Louis Stevenson, who wrote Treasure Island and The Strange, Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. The Stevenson family was to lighthouses what the Batch family was to music absolute legends in their field for generations. They designed and built the vast majority of Scotland's lighthouses, taming some of the most dangerous coastlines in the world. It's a bit funny to think that one cousin was writing about pirates and hidden treasure, while the other was building the very things that would keep those pirates from crashing into a cliff. The real magic, however, is inside the lantern room at the very top of the tower. If you were to climb the spiraling iron staircase, you would find yourself in a chamber of glass and polished brass. At its center sits the heart of the lighthouse, the Fresnel lens. This isn't just a big light bulb. It's a breathtaking work of art and science. Imagine a beehive made of crystal, a complex array of concentric glass prisms and lenses, all meticulously cut and polished to capture every single photon from a single central flame and focus it into a blindingly powerful pencil-thin beam. This revolutionary design, invented by the French physicist Augustin Jean Fresnel, could magnify the light from a simple paraffin lamp into a beam visible for over 20 miles. It rotates on a clockwork mechanism, a system of weights and gears that has to be wound by hand like a giant grandfather clock. The keeper's job was to keep this intricate machine running, to keep the wicks trimmed, the paraffin flowing, and the priceless glass polished to a perfect, streak-free shine. This wasn't just janitorial work. It was the work of a technician, a watchmaker, and a guardian, all rolled into one. Now for a peculiar, little-known detail about the construction. To get the tons of stone, cement, and equipment up the 150-foot sheer cliff from the landing stage, the builders, under Stevenson's direction, had to construct a temporary steam-powered railway, or tramway, that ran almost vertically up the rock face. You can still see the remnants of the track bed cut into the stone. Imagine being the person operating that winch, dangling a cart full of priceless lens components over a churning sea. The health and safety briefing for that job must have been brief. Probably just a firm handshake and a quiet, "Don't drop it." Naval historians still debate whether the addition of the Flannan Light directly correlated with a measurable decrease in shipwrecks in its first year, given the unpredictable nature of North Atlantic weather and the sheer volume of maritime traffic. It's hard to prove a negative. How many ships didn't wreck because of the light? But for the crews who saw it, there was no debate at all. It was a guardian angel made of brick and glass. The lighthouse itself is a character in our story. It's the silent, unblinking observer. It represents order, routine, and human ingenuity set against the chaos of nature. It's a place of immense responsibility. For the men who lived here, the rhythmic flash of the light was the pulse of their entire existence. Every 30 seconds, a double flash, a heartbeat of light in the vast, dark expanse of the ocean. It was their duty to maintain this heartbeat, to ensure it never faltered. The thought of this light ever going out would have been unimaginable, a dereliction of duty of the highest order. It would be like a heart stopping. And that is precisely what is about to happen. As you stand there, admiring the stoic, white tower, a profound sense of foreboding settles over you. You are looking at a perfect machine, a flawless system. But the one variable that can never be fully controlled is the human element, the ghosts in the machine. And the machine is about to fall silent. Let's put faces to the ghosts. On that lonely rock in December of 1900, 3 men were tasked with keeping the beacon lit. You need to understand who they were, because their personalities, their histories, are the only clues we have to the human side of this puzzle. Our 3 keepers are Thomas Marshall, James Duckett, and Donald MacArthur. Step inside the living quarters with me, and let's imagine them here in this small, self-contained world. The air inside would have smelled of paraffin oil, pipe tobacco, and frying bacon. It would have been a stark contrast to the wildness outside, a pocket of warmth, order, and quiet routine. First, there's Thomas Marshall. He's the second assistant keeper, a younger man in his late 20s. He's relatively new to the service, but has a good record. You can picture him as the diligent, perhaps slightly anxious one, eager to prove himself. He's the one who would double-check the weather log, the one who would polish the brass fittings just a little more vigorously than required. He has a family back on the mainland, and his letters home would have been full of the mundane details of life here, trying to bridge the immense distance with words. He's counting the days until his 2 weeks of shore leave, a common preoccupation for all keepers. 6 weeks on, 2 weeks off, that was the standard rotation for the Northern Lighthouse Board. A rhythm of life that was both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because it provided a definite end to the isolation, and a curse because 6 weeks could feel like a lifetime. Next, we have James Duckett, the principal keeper. He's the man in charge. In his early 40s, he's a seasoned veteran of the lighthouse service, a steady hand with a wife and 4 children waiting for him back home. You can imagine him as the calm center of the trio, the one who arbitrates disputes and ensures the strict regulations of the board are followed to the letter. He's the kind of man who finds comfort in routine, who understands the moods of the sea, and the mechanics of the lamp, as well as he knows his own children's faces. He's respected, competent, and by all accounts, a kind and fair-minded leader. He'd be the one sitting at the head of the small kitchen table, reading a well-worn book or writing a letter to his wife, a quiet authority in his posture. He has a lot to lose, a full life waiting for him beyond this rock. For him, this isn't an adventure. It's a job, a demanding but honorable profession that puts food on his family's table. His presence would have been a reassuring one for a younger keeper like Marshall. And then there's the third man, the wild card, Donald MacArthur. He's not even supposed to be here. He's what was known as an occasional keeper, a relief man brought in to cover a shift when a regular keeper was unavailable. In this case, the man he was replacing, William Ross, had fallen ill. This is a crucial, strange fact of the case. MacArthur was a last-minute substitute. He was an experienced seaman, a tough, middle-aged man from the Outer Hebrides, known for his strength and his knowledge of the sea. But he also had a reputation. He was known to be a brawler, a man with a quick temper and a sullen disposition, a lone wolf forced into a tiny cage with 2 other men. In the close, claustrophobic quarters of a lighthouse, personality clashes could be more dangerous than any storm. You can picture him as the quiet one in the corner, staring out the window at the crashing waves. A storm brewing both outside and perhaps inside him as well. He wasn't part of the regular team. He was an outsider, a temporary cog in a machine that relied on perfect harmony. It's like having a surprise roommate who you know has a history of getting into bar fights. It would certainly change the dynamic of the house. Life for these 3 men was a cycle of rigidly enforced tasks. They were governed by the instructions to lightkeepers, a thick book of rules and regulations issued by the Northern Lighthouse Board that dictated nearly every moment of their day. There was a time for waking, a time for cleaning, a time for polishing the lens, a time for winding the clockwork mechanism, a time for recording weather data, and a time for standing watch. The watches were split between them, ensuring that someone was always awake, always vigilant, 24 hours a day. It was a quasi-military existence, designed to combat the triple threats of complacency, madness, and the sea. Biographers and historians still debate whether MacArthur's known volatile temperament played any role in the unfolding events, or if it's simply a dramatic detail latched onto by later storytellers, looking for a simple, violent explanation. It's easy to paint him as the villain, but the truth is likely far more complex. He was just a man, doing a tough job in a tougher place. The isolation was the real enemy. For 6 weeks at a time, these 3 men were the only human beings for 50 miles in any direction. Their only contact with the outside world was the twice-monthly visit of the relief ship, bringing supplies, mail, and a fresh face. They had books, a deck of cards, and their own thoughts for company. It's a recipe for psychological strain. Any small annoyance, the way one man slurped his tea, the way another snored, could magnify over time into an unbearable grievance. Their survival depended not just on their technical skill, but on their ability to tolerate each other. Think of it as the world's most extreme group project, with the grade being staying alive and sane. As you stand in this quiet imaginary room with them, you can feel the tension under the surface of the routine. The steady ticking of the clock, the distant moan of the wind, and the unspoken thoughts of three very different men trapped together on a rock, tending a light that must never, ever go out. Now, let's settle into the rhythm of their lives, the very routine that would soon be so mysteriously shattered. Picture the day-to-day existence on the rock, as the keepers would have called it. It's a life of profound monotony, punctuated by moments of sheer terror when the weather turns. Your day begins before dawn, in a small Spartan bedroom. The air is cold, and the stone walls seem to sweat with dampness. The first thing you hear is the ever-present wind, a constant companion that shrieks and moans around the edges of the building. One keeper is already on watch in the tower, having been there for hours through the blackest part of the night. The other two rise, dress, and head to the small kitchen. The first task is to get the coal-fired stove going, its warmth a welcome defiance against the island's chill. Breakfast is a simple, hearty affair. Porridge, perhaps some fried eggs and bread. The conversation is minimal, comfortable in its familiarity. They talk about the weather, the state of the machinery, maybe a piece of news from a month-old newspaper brought by the last supply boat. After breakfast, the work begins in earnest. The regulations were incredibly specific. A common historical fact is that lighthouse keepers of this era were expected to keep their stations as clean as a naval vessel. Brasswork had to be polished until it gleamed, floors scrubbed, windows washed, and every tool kept in its precise place. This wasn't just about appearances. It was a matter of discipline. In a place where one moment of inattention could lead to disaster, routine was a shield against chaos. You and your two companions would split the duties. One man might be tasked with cleaning the living quarters, another with maintaining the exterior buildings and the foghorn apparatus. The principal keeper, Ducat, would be overseeing it all, making meticulous entries in the logbook. Every detail was recorded: the wind speed and direction, the barometric pressure, the consumption of paraffin oil, any notable sightings of ships. Their lives were chronicled in neat, cursive script, a testament to their unwavering diligence. It was, in essence, the ultimate remote working job. But your boss is a 1,000-ton storm, and your deadlines are non-negotiable. The most sacred and demanding task was the care of the light itself. After the morning chores, two of you would make the climb up the winding stairs to the lantern room. The keeper who was on the night watch would be finishing his shift, ready to hand over. The air in the lantern room is warm, smelling faintly of warm metal and oil. The first job is to extinguish the lamp. Then, the delicate process of cleaning begins. The massive Fresnel lens, with its hundreds of individual prisms, has to be wiped down with a soft cloth, every speck of dust or soot removed. The intricate clockwork mechanism that rotates the lens must be cleaned, oiled, and then wound. This involved cranking a heavy weight up from the bottom of the tower, a physically demanding task that set the clock for the next several hours. You'd be working in close quarters, a careful, silent dance around the priceless glass heart of the tower. A single clumsy move, a dropped tool, could crack a lens and compromise the entire operation. The pressure to be perfect always must have been immense. It's not like you could just order a replacement part on Amazon Prime. For a moment of levity, consider this weird, quirky fact about lighthouse life. Many keepers became avid and surprisingly talented knitters. With long hours of quiet watchkeeping and limited entertainment, knitting was a practical and meditative hobby. They would knit socks, sweaters, and scarves for themselves and their families. It's a wonderfully gentle image of big burly seaman like MacArthur, who could supposedly handle himself in any dockside brawl, sitting quietly by the lamp, needles clicking, knitting a tiny booty for a new nephew back home. It's a reminder that these were just ordinary men in an extraordinary situation. Historians still debate whether the strict, isolating nature of the job attracted a certain type of personality, solitary, meticulous, and perhaps slightly eccentric, or if the job itself molded men into that form. Were they loners to begin with, or did the lighthouse make them that way? It's a fascinating psychological question, pondering whether the man makes the job or the job makes the man. The afternoons might offer a brief respite. If the weather was calm, a rare gift in the Flannans, you might venture outside the compound walls. You could walk the perimeter of the island, checking on the landing stages, or simply sit on the cliff edge and watch the seabirds. It was also a time for personal chores, mending clothes, writing letters, or reading one of the books from the small library provided by the board. But even in these moments of peace, the sea was a constant presence. Its sound, its smell, its power was inescapable. And when a storm rolled in, this quiet routine would be shattered. The island would become a prison, the wind screaming with hurricane force, and waves of unimaginable size would crash against the cliffs, sending spray and solid green water clear over the top of the plateau, 150 feet up. The keepers would be trapped inside, the building shuddering around them, their only job to ensure the light. Their light continued to pierce the maelstrom. This was their life, a relentless cycle of quiet diligence and stark terror, a lonely, ordered existence on the very edge of the world. The rhythm you've just settled into, that meticulous, predictable beat of life on the rock, is about to break. Our mystery begins not with a scream or a bang, but with an absence, a void. It starts with a simple observation made by people who are miles away, battling the same unforgiving sea that our keepers called home. The date is December 15th, 1900. A steamship named the Arctur is making its way from Philadelphia to Leith, Scotland. The weather is foul, the seas are high, and the crew is on high alert as they navigate the treacherous waters of the Outer Hebrides. The captain, a man named Holman, knows these waters. He's expecting to see the familiar, reassuring double flash of the Flannan Isles light. It's a critical landmark on his chart, a confirmation of his position in the storm. But as the Arctur passes the islands, there is only darkness. The captain and his crew scan the horizon, peering into the rain and spray. But the spot where a brilliant spear of light should be is just an empty patch of night. This is more than just an inconvenience. It's deeply unsettling. A lighthouse doesn't just go out. It's like a star disappearing from the sky. The keepers on Eilean Moor were known for their professionalism. The Northern Lighthouse Board was renowned for its standards. For a light like this to fail, something must be seriously wrong. Captain Holman makes a note of it in his ship's log. He's troubled, but he has his own vessel and crew to worry about. He can't stop, not in this weather. He presumes that once he reaches port, he will report the outage, and the authorities will handle it. It's the maritime equivalent of seeing your neighbor's house completely dark at Christmas and assuming their power is out. You're concerned, but you don't immediately assume the worst. A common historical fact is that in the age before radio communication became standard on ships, there was no way for the Arctur to instantly alert the authorities. The news of the dark lighthouse would have to travel at the speed of the ship itself, arriving only when it docked in Leith several days later. The problem is, due to a mix-up and some bureaucratic slowness, the Arctur's report doesn't immediately get passed on to the Northern Lighthouse Board. It's a small but tragic delay. So for days, no one in a position of authority knows that the light is out. No one knows that 3 men on a remote rock might be in desperate trouble. The families of Marshall, Duckett, and MacArthur are at home, preparing for Christmas, expecting their loved ones to be safe. If lonely, performing their vital duties. They have no idea that the heartbeat of the lighthouse has stopped. The silence from Eilean Moor is absolute, but for now, it's a silence that no one is listening for. You can feel the cold dread of that silence creeping into the story. It's the kind of quiet that feels heavier than any sound, a void where a familiar comfort used to be. It has the digital equivalent of sending a text message and seeing it has been delivered, but not read, for days on end. The imagination starts to fill in the terrifying blanks. Meanwhile, back on Eilean Mor, the island sits in darkness. The magnificent Fresnel lens, which you saw being so carefully polished, is now cold and inert. The clockwork mechanism is still. The three men, who you pictured in their warm kitchen, are gone. The routines, the rules, the entire purpose of this place have all ceased. The wind still howls, the waves still crash, the birds still cry, but the human element, the one thing that gave this rock its meaning, has been extinguished. The island has reclaimed its wild, pre-human state. The outage wasn't just a momentary flicker. Another ship, a fishing trawler, also noted the absence of the light around the same time, further confirming that this was not a brief, fixable issue. The sentinel was truly blind. Now for a strange but true tidbit. Lighthouses were designed with multiple redundancies. They had spare lamps, spare wicks, spare parts for almost everything. For the light to go out and stay out, it would likely mean that either a catastrophic, unfixable mechanical failure had occurred, or there was no one left to fix it. The official relief vessel, the Hesperus, was scheduled to make its routine trip to the Flannans on December 20th. It was supposed to be a standard supply run, bringing one of the keepers home for his shore leave and delivering Christmas provisions. The captain of the Hesperus, Joseph Moore, was a man who knew the Flannans well. He was the one who had recruited the keepers, the one who ferried them back and forth. He knew them personally. Because of severe storms that had been lashing the coast, the Hesperus was delayed in its departure. It wasn't until Boxing Day, December 26th, that the weather finally broke enough for the ship to attempt the crossing. So, for at least 11 days, from December 15th to December 26th, the lighthouse on Eilean Mor was dark and silent, and the world was none the wiser. Historians still debate whether an earlier response, had the Arctur's report been acted upon immediately, would have made any difference to the outcome. Could a rescue have been possible? Or was it already too late? This question hangs over the entire story, a ghost of what might have been. As the Hesperus finally steams out of harbor, its crew is unaware that they are not on a routine mission. They are sailing towards the heart of a mystery, towards an island that is keeping a terrible secret. The journey of the relief vessel Hesperus is a story in itself. Imagine yourself on its deck on the morning of December 26th, 1900. The storm that delayed your departure for nearly a week has passed, but the sea is still angry. A massive, sullen swell rolls under the ship, lifting it high on a crest before dropping it sickeningly into a deep trough. The sky is a canvas of bruised gray and white, and the air is bitingly cold. Captain Joseph Moore stands on the bridge, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He's a capable, experienced sailor, but he's anxious. The delay has put everyone on edge, and the fact that he was unable to see the lighthouse's beam during the previous nights, even from a great distance, is a knot of worry in his stomach. He knows his men. He knows Duckett, Marshall, and MacArthur. They are professionals. The light should be on. As a routine part of his approach, he tries to get their attention. He orders the ship's horn to be sounded, a long, powerful blast that rolls across the waves. He expects to see a signal in return, perhaps a flag raised on the island's flagpole, a sign that they have seen the ship and are preparing for its arrival. But there is no response. The island of Eilean Mor grows larger on the horizon, a dark, silent lump against the sky. The white tower of the lighthouse is clearly visible now, stark and pristine. But there is no flag, no puff of smoke from the kitchen chimney, no sign of life at all. Captain Moore feels a prickle of genuine fear. This is not right. This is not how it's supposed to happen. The keepers know the relief ship's schedule. Even with the delay, they should be on high alert, eagerly anticipating its arrival. The arrival of the Hesperus meant mail from home, fresh. Food, news of the world, and for one of them, a ticket back to his family. They would be watching, waiting. The lack of a welcoming flag is a breach of protocol, so severe it borders on the unthinkable. It's like pulling up to your friend's house and finding the doors and windows wide open, but no one is answering your calls. The normal patterns of life have been broken. The sea around the island is still too rough to attempt a landing at the main pier on the eastern side. The massive swells are crashing against the landing stage with ferocious power. So Captain Moore makes the decision to circle the island and try the western landing, which is more sheltered in these conditions. As the Hesperus steams slowly around the imposing cliffs of Eilean Moor, the sense of wrongness deepens. The entire crew is on deck now, staring at the island, their voices hushed. They scan the cliff paths, the compound, the tower itself, looking for any sign of the three men. A wave, a figure in a window, anything. But there is nothing. Just the birds, wheeling and crying their endless, lonely chorus. The island looks pristine, untouched. The lighthouse stands perfect and impassive, like a tombstone. A common historical fact about these landings is that they were notoriously dangerous, even in good weather. The keepers and supplies had to be winched ashore by a crane, or derrick, from a small boat that bobbed precariously beside the landing stage. It was a nerve-wracking process that required immense skill and timing. Captain Moore decides he can't wait any longer. He needs to get a man ashore. He selects one of his most able seamen, a man named Joseph Moore, a confusing but true coincidence of names, so we'll call him Relief Keeper Moore to distinguish him. Relief Keeper Moore is the man who is supposed to be rotating in to replace one of the keepers. He is rowed ashore in a small dinghy, a dangerous and difficult maneuver in the churning water. He has a small box with him, containing provisions, but his primary mission is to find out what has happened. As he leaps from the dinghy onto the slippery, seaweed-covered rocks of the western landing, he must feel a profound sense of dread. He is the first person to set foot on this island in weeks. He is stepping into the heart of the silence. 4. An odd, lesser-known fact. The landing stages themselves were engineering marvels. One on the east and one on the west of the island, connected by a tramway that ran right through a tunnel in the rock. This was to ensure that a landing was possible, regardless of which direction the wind and waves were coming from. The system was designed for every eventuality, except for the one it was now facing. Relief Keeper Moore stands alone for a moment on the landing stage, the dinghy already pulling away to a safe distance. The roar of the surf is deafening here at the base of the cliff. He looks up the steep iron ladder that leads to the path above. The silence from the top of the cliff is what's truly terrifying. There should be shouts of welcome, men coming down to help with the supplies. Instead, there is nothing, just the wind. He begins the climb, his hands cold on the iron rungs, his heart pounding in his chest. Every step up takes him further from the safety of the sea and deeper into the mystery. On the ship, Captain Moore and the rest of the crew watch his small figure ascend the cliff until he disappears over the edge. Now they can only wait. The minutes stretch into an eternity. The crew of the Hesperus does not know it yet, but they are the first audience to a tragedy, the unwilling witnesses to the aftermath of an event that will baffle and haunt people for more than a century. Historians still debate the exact emotional state of Captain Moore at this moment, whether he was already fearing the worst, perhaps a tragic accident, or if his mind was still searching for a rational, mundane explanation. Was it fear or just profound confusion? As he stared at that silent tower, It was likely a terrible, sickening mix of both. You are now in the boots of relief keeper Joseph Moore. You have just completed the harrowing climb-up from the western landing stage. Your breath is coming in ragged gasps, a mixture of physical exertion and rising panic. You stand at the top of the cliff path on the flat plateau that holds the lighthouse compound. The wind up here is ferocious, a physical force that tugs at your coat and fills your ears with a low, mournful howl. You expected to be greeted here. You expected to see James Duckett or Thomas Marshall, or even the gruff Donald MacArthur, striding towards you with a gruff welcome and a hand to help with the gear. Instead, you are met with an unnerving and complete silence. Not a human silence, because the air is thick with the shrieks of the gannets and the roar of the wind and sea. But it is a profoundly human silence. The absence of a voice, a footstep, a cough. The world up here feels empty, abandoned. You take a few tentative steps forward, your boots crunching on the gravel path that leads towards the lighthouse compound. The main gate in the sturdy stone wall that surrounds the buildings is closed, but not latched. It swings open with a low groan as you push it. This is the first small, sharp note of wrongness. The gate should be secured. You step into the courtyard. The silence within the walls is even deeper, as the stone barrier muffles the rage of the wind. Before you is the one-story accommodation block, with its neat, dark windows. To your left, the white tower of the lighthouse itself rises into the gray sky, impassive and aloof. There is no sign of damage, no obvious indication of a struggle or a disaster. Everything looks normal, too normal. It's the kind of chilling neatness you might find in a museum exhibit, a perfect replica of a place where life once happened. It feels preserved, not lived in. You feel like an intruder, a trespasser in a place that has fallen under a strange, silent spell. You call out their names. Duckett, Marshall, MacArthur. Your voice sounds thin and small in the open air, swallowed almost immediately by the wind. The only answer is the echo of your own words, thrown back at you by the cold stone walls. You call out again, louder this time, a note of desperation creeping into your tone. Hello. The relief is here. Nothing. Not a flicker of a curtain. Not a shadow moving behind a window. You walk towards the main entrance of the living quarters, your heart now a frantic drum against your ribs. Your mind is racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Perhaps they are all asleep? Unlikely, in the middle of the day, with the relief. Ship expected. Perhaps they are all in the tower? Possible. Maybe there was a problem with the lamp, and all three were needed to fix it. This is the hope you cling to as you approach the heavy wooden door. It would be a breach of protocol one man should always be on watch at ground level, but it's better than the alternatives that are beginning to form in the dark corners of your mind. You reach the door to the main building. Your hand hesitates for a moment before it touches the cold brass knob. You brace yourself, expecting it to be locked. The keepers were meticulous. The door should be locked from the inside if they are all within. But as your hand closes around the knob and you turn, it gives way with a soft click. The door is unlocked. This is the second, much louder, alarm bell. It's a flagrant violation of the rules. The Northern Lighthouse Board regulations, a document we know the keepers followed religiously, stated that the lighthouse door was to be kept locked at all times. A common historical fact is that this rule was primarily for the safety of the keepers themselves, to prevent them from being accidentally locked out in a storm, but also for the security of the station. An unlocked door suggests haste or carelessness, or something else entirely, something that made them forget the most basic of rules. It's like finding a bank vault standing wide open. It's not just unlocked. It's fundamentally wrong. You push the door open and step inside. The air within is still and cold. colder, somehow, than the air outside. The familiar smells of paraffin, coal smoke, and cooked food are gone, replaced by a stale, musty odor of a place that has been closed up for some time. The silence in here is absolute. It presses in on you, a physical weight. You are standing in a small entryway. To one side is the kitchen and living area. To the other are the bedrooms. Straight ahead is the covered passage to the tower. Every instinct is screaming at you to turn around, to run back to the cliff edge and signal the Hesperus to not go any further. But you can't. You have to know. You have to find them. Historians still debate the significance of the closed but unlatched outer gate versus the unlocked main door. Did it imply the men left with the intention of coming right back, only securing the gate against the wind? Or does the combination of the two suggest a sequence of events we can't even begin to fathom? It's a tiny detail, but in a mystery with so few clues, every detail is a universe of possibility. With your breath held tight in your chest, you take another step, moving out of the entryway and into the main living quarters, towards the heart of the silence. You step fully into the main living area, which serves as both kitchen and common room. The light from the windows is weak and gray, casting long shadows across the room. Your eyes take a moment to adjust, and as they do, the scene that resolves itself before you is one of profound and chilling strangeness. It's not a scene of chaos or violence. There are no signs of a struggle, no broken furniture, no bloodstains. In some ways, that would have been easier to understand. Instead, you are confronted with a tableau of interrupted life, a moment frozen in time. The room is neat and tidy, almost unnaturally so. The beds in the adjoining sleeping area are made, their blankets pulled taut. The floor is swept clean. The brass instruments on the wall are polished. This is the meticulous work of the keepers, the ghost of their routine hanging in the cold air. But it's the small details that are so deeply, terribly wrong. On the kitchen table, a meal sits half-eaten. A plate with a piece of pickled meat and some potatoes, a fork resting beside it, as if the person eating had just gotten up for a moment, fully intending to return and finish their lunch. It's a domestic, ordinary scene, yet in this context, it's utterly horrifying. Who leaves a meal to go cold? What could possibly have called a man away from his food so suddenly that he would leave it like this? It speaks of an abrupt, unplanned departure. You move closer, your boots silent on. The stone floor. Next to the table, another detail snags your attention. A single wooden chair is overturned, lying on its side. It's not smashed or broken, just knocked over. Again, it suggests haste. Did someone push back from the table in a hurry? Did they stand up so fast they sent the chair tumbling? It's a single small point of disorder in an otherwise immaculate room, and it screams louder than any shout. It's the punctuation mark on a sentence you can't read. Your gaze sweeps the room, searching for more clues, for anything that can help you piece together what happened here. And then you see it. On the wall is a small clock, its pendulum still. You step closer to examine its face. The hands are frozen at a few minutes past 9. The clock has stopped. This is perhaps the most significant clue of all. The clocks in a lighthouse were not mere decorations. They were essential tools used for timing the light's rotation, for keeping the watches, for making accurate logbook entries. The keepers would have kept them wound without fail. For the clock to have stopped means that at some point the routine was broken. No one was there to wind it. It provides a potential timestamp for the moment when the normal functioning of this place ceased. Sometime after 9 o'clock, on some unknown day, the men of Aylin Moor stopped keeping time. It's a chillingly poetic detail. Time itself has stopped in this place. A common historical fact is that lighthouse life was so time-dependent that keepers were often issued with high quality, reliable chronometers, and were trained to maintain them. A stopped clock was a sign of a critical failure in the system. Now, for a strange detail that is often overlooked in retellings of the story. The initial report by Relief Keeper Moore noted that the ashes in the fireplace were cold. This suggests that the fire had been out for a significant amount of time, likely several days. This, combined with the stopped clock, begins to paint a picture of a place that has been empty for a while. Not hours, but days. The coldness of the place is not just from the winter weather. It's the deep, settled cold of abandonment. The half-eaten meal, then, is even more mysterious. Food would not sit out on a plate for days. This introduces a contradiction. The cold grate and stopped clock suggest a long absence, but the meal suggests a sudden departure just moments before. How can both be true? It's a paradox that has fueled speculation for over a century. It's like finding a pristine car wreck with a hot cup of coffee in the cup holder. The timelines don't add. Up, you back out of the kitchen area, a cold sweat on your brow. You check the other rooms. The bedrooms are neat. There are few personal belongings still in place. There is no sign of packing, no indication that anyone was preparing to leave. Everything is exactly as it should be, except for the deafening absence of the people who belong here. You move to the covered walkway that leads to the lighthouse tower itself. The door to the tower is also unlocked. You climb the spiraling iron staircase, your footsteps echoing in the enclosed space. You emerge into the lantern room. It's just as you imagined it. A space of glass and brass, but it's cold and silent. The great Fresnel lens is immaculate. The brass is gleaming. The lamp is cleaned, trimmed, and filled with paraffin, ready to be lit. The keepers had done their job. They had prepared the light for the coming night. And then they had vanished. Historians still debate the exact sequence of events implied by these clues. Did the incident happen at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m.? Did one man leave his meal? Or was it the last meal eaten days ago? The scene in the lighthouse is a silent, maddening puzzle, and you've only just found the first few pieces. The most baffling clue of all is still waiting for you, back in the entrance hall. You descend the tower's spiral staircase, the silence of the lantern room clinging to you. The knowledge that the lamp was perfectly prepared, but never lit, sends a fresh wave of dread through you. The men completed their most sacred duty, and then what? You return to the main living quarters, your mind a whirlwind of contradictory evidence. The tidy rooms, the cold fireplace, the stopped clock, the overturned chair, the half-eaten meal. It feels like the set of a play where the actors have walked off stage in the middle of a scene, leaving all the props in place. You find yourself back in the small entrance hall, the place where you first stepped into this unnerving stillness. And it's here that you notice something you missed before, something that will become one of the most debated and puzzling details of the entire mystery. Hanging on a hook by the door are two sets of oilskins. Oilskins were the heavy-duty, waterproof coats and trousers that were the essential foul-weather gear for any sailor or lighthouse keeper. They were the Gore-Tex of their day, cumbersome but absolutely vital for survival against the wind, rain, and sea spray. You see two sets hanging there, dark and stiff, Thomas Marshall's and James Duckett's, but there should be three. Donald MacArthur's set is missing. This is a strange and deeply significant discovery. It suggests that two of the men, Marshall and Duckett, left the lighthouse without their protective gear. But MacArthur, it seems, put his on before he went out. This single detail throws a wrench into any simple explanation. If there was a sudden emergency, a crisis that required all hands on deck immediately, why would one man, and only one man, take the time to put on his heavy weather gear? And conversely, why would the other two rush out into what must have been a ferocious storm without theirs? Let's break this down. The weather logs from nearby stations and the reports from ships like the Arctur indicate that the weather around the Flannan Isles in mid-December was exceptionally severe. Gale-force winds, high seas, and freezing rain. To go outside in such conditions without oilskins would be unthinkable. It wouldn't just be uncomfortable. It would be dangerously foolish. Within minutes, you'd be soaked to the skin, and in the freezing Atlantic wind, hypothermia would set in with terrifying speed. James Duckett and Thomas Marshall were experienced men. They knew the risks. They would not have gone outside unprepared, unless the situation was so dire, so immediate, that they had absolutely no choice. It suggests a life-or-death emergency that happened in an instant. A common historical fact is that lighthouse regulations stipulated that keepers should never venture outside the main compound during severe storms, except in the most extreme emergencies, and even then, never alone. But then we have the puzzle of Donald MacArthur. His oilskins are gone. This implies he had the time and the forethought to prepare himself for the elements. It contradicts the theory of a sudden, panicked rush. Did the emergency happen, and only MacArthur had the presence of mind to grab his gear? Or was he already outside when the crisis occurred? Or does it point to something else entirely? Some scenarios start to form in your mind, each more unsettling than the last. Perhaps Marshall and Duckett rushed out to help MacArthur, who was already in some kind of trouble at one of the landing stages. That would explain why he was wearing his gear, and they were not. It's a plausible theory, one that would be favored in the official investigation, but it still feels incomplete. The scene inside doesn't feel like two men rushing to a rescue. It feels more disjointed than that. Now for a peculiar, often forgotten detail related to this clue. In the entrance hall, alongside the two sets of oilskins, a pair of sea boots was also found. It was never definitively established whose boots they were. This adds another layer of confusion. Did one of the men who rushed out without his oilskins also go out in just his indoor slippers or socks? To face a storm-battered cliff path in anything less than heavy, sturdy boots would be suicidal. The detail of the boots is often dropped from the story because it muddies the waters even further, but it's a crucial part of the scene that Relief Keeper Moore discovered. It amplifies the sense of inexplicable behavior. These weren't rookies. These were hardened professionals who suddenly began acting in a way that defied all logic and instinct for self-preservation. It's like finding out a team of astronauts decided to go for a spacewalk without their helmets. It just doesn't compute. Historians still debate the importance of the missing oilskins. Is it the key to the whole mystery, pointing to a specific sequence of events? Or is it a red herring, a detail that seems significant, but ultimately leads us down the wrong path? Some have even suggested that MacArthur, the tough Hebridean sailor, simply wore his oilskins more often than the others, perhaps even indoors, and that their absence means nothing at all. But that feels like an attempt to explain away the strangeness, to make it fit a narrative that makes sense. The truth is, it doesn't make sense. And the final piece of the puzzle, the one you are about to discover, will only deepen the mystery and plunge it into the realm of the truly bizarre. Having absorbed the chilling implications of the half-eaten meal, the stopped clock, and the perplexing matter of the oilskins, you continue your search. There is one place left to look for answers, one final repository of the keepers' lives. The lighthouse logbook. This wasn't just a diary. It was an official document, a legal record of the station's operation. It was kept in the main living area, on a small desk. You approach it with a sense of reverence and dread. This book contains the last words of the lost men. Its pages are the only testimony they left behind. You open it carefully. The early entries for December are exactly what you'd expect. Neat, professional, and methodical. Thomas Marshall, The junior keeper seems to have been responsible for most of the recent entries. He records the wind direction, the barometric pressure, the state of the lamp, the routine chores. It's the mundane, reassuring script of a world that is still working as it should. You read through the entries for December 12th. Everything is normal. Martial notes and strong winds, but nothing out of the ordinary for the Flannans in winter. He records the winding of the clockwork, the cleaning of the lens. Then the tone changes. On an otherwise blank section of the slate, used for rough notes before they were formally entered into the log, you find a series of bizarre and deeply disturbing entries. The first is from December 12th, written by Thomas Marshall. He writes, "Severe winds the likes of which I have never seen before in 20 years. This is strange on two counts. First, Marshall is only in his late 20s. He hasn't been a keeper for 20 years. Was he quoting one of the older men? Second, and more importantly, there were no reports of such a storm in the area on that day. The weather was rough, yes, but not unprecedented. The log from the lighthouse at the Butt of Lewis, not far away, shows nothing of the sort. It says, if Alan Moore was in the grip of a localized, phantom storm that no one else saw, the entry continues, and the professional tone dissolves into raw fear. Marshall writes that James Duckett, a steady, veteran principal keeper, has been very quiet, and that Donald MacArthur, the tough-as-nails occasional keeper, has been crying. The image is staggering. MacArthur, the seasoned brawler, the stoic seaman, weeping like a child. What could possibly reduce a man like that to tears? It suggests a level of terror that is almost incomprehensible. What did they see? What did? They hear? The wind? Or something else in the wind? This entry paints a picture not of a physical struggle, but of a profound psychological breakdown. The three men, trapped in their stone tower, apparently being tormented by an unseen force. A common historical fact is that lighthouse logbooks were meant to be objective records of meteorological and operational data. The inclusion of personal, emotional details like Duckett has been quiet or MacArthur is crying was a complete and utter breach of all protocol. It's a sign that the writer, Marshall, was under extreme duress. You turn the page, your hand trembling. Slightly. The next entry is from December 13th. The storm is apparently still raging. The entry notes that all three men have been praying in an official logbook. Again, this is unheard of. These were not men given to flights of fancy or religious hysteria. They were practical, grounded professionals. For them to resort to prayer together suggests they felt they were facing something beyond their control, something that ropes and iron and stone could not defeat. The very foundations of the rational world were shaking. It's a detail that sends a shiver down your spine. They were trapped, terrified, and turning to the only comfort they had left. It's like finding a note from a pilot in a plane's black box that just says, "We've seen something in the clouds, and we are all praying." It's the subtext that's terrifying. The final cryptic entry is dated December 15th. It is short and chilling. Storm ended, sea calm. God is over all. The storm, this phantom tempest that terrorized them for days, has apparently passed. The sea is calm. There's a sense of relief, of deliverance. God is over all. It sounds like a concluding prayer, a final statement of faith after a terrible ordeal. And then, nothing. The logbook falls silent. This is the last entry ever made. If this log is to be believed, the men vanished on or after December 15th, during a period of calm weather. This directly contradicts the theory that they were swept away by a giant storm wave. The log describes the storm as being over. This is the central maddening paradox of the Flannan Isles mystery. The clues inside the lighthouse seem to point in completely different directions. Historians still debate the authenticity of these final logbook entries. Were they written as they happened? Or were they perhaps fabricated by one of the keepers in a state of delusion? Or even written after the fact by someone else entirely? Some have suggested the handwriting changes between entries, though this has never been conclusively proven. A weird fact to consider: the slate on which these notes were written was wiped clean by the time the official investigation took place, meaning we only have the transcribed versions from the relief crew. The original, raw evidence was lost. The logbook, instead of providing answers, has only given you a story of profound, inexplicable fear, a tale of a storm that wasn't, and a silence that came after. After the discovery of the logbook, Relief Keeper Moore signals the Hesperus, and more men come ashore, including Captain Moore himself. They conduct a more thorough search of the island, a grim and desperate task. They scour the cliff paths, the landing stages, and the rocky shoreline, calling out the names of the missing men until their voices are hoarse. But the island gives back no answers. There is no sign of Duckett, Marshall, or MacArthur. Not a body, not a shred of clothing, not a single clue to their whereabouts. They have, to all appearances, vanished from the face of the earth. The men from the Hesperus are left with the bleak task of temporarily manning the lighthouse themselves to get the vital beacon lit once more. Imagine the atmosphere in that small building that night. 3 fresh men living in the rooms of the vanished, eating at their table, sleeping in their beds, haunted by the profound silence and the unanswered questions. The Hesperus returns to the mainland, and the news of the disappearances spreads like wildfire. The mystery of the Flannan Isles becomes a national sensation. The public is captivated by the story of the 3 keepers who disappeared from a Locktroom island. Newspapers run sensational headlines, and speculation runs rampant. The Northern Lighthouse Board, a sober and serious organization, is now faced with a public relations crisis and a heartbreaking tragedy. They immediately launch an official investigation, led by their superintendent, Robert Muirhead. Muirhead was a man who knew the keepers and the lighthouse service inside and out. He traveled to Eilean Mor himself on December 29th to conduct his own examination of the scene. He is our official detective in this case, and it is his conclusion that will become the accepted, if not entirely satisfying, explanation for the tragedy. Muirhead's investigation is thorough and methodical. He interviews the crew of the Hesperus. He examines the state of the lighthouse, the logbook, the oilskins. He walks the island, paying close attention to the 2 landing stages. And it is on the western landing, the more sheltered one, where Relief Keeper Moore first came ashore, that he finds his key evidence. He notes that the iron railings along the cliff path leading down to the landing have been bent and twisted, out of shape. A supply box, which should have been safely stowed in a crevice 110 feet above sea level, has been smashed open, its contents strewn about. Most tellingly, he sees that a large chunk of rock, weighing more than a ton, has been dislodged from the cliff face. To Muirhead, this points to only one possible culprit: the sea itself. He concludes that a storm of unimaginable ferocity must have battered the island. During this storm, a series of colossal freak waves, what we would today call rogue waves, must have struck the western side of the island, sending a massive wall of water surging up the cliff face, even to that incredible height. This leads Muirhead to formulate his official theory of what happened. He speculates that on the afternoon of December 15th, after the storm described in the log had supposedly passed, the men went down to the western landing. Perhaps they went to check on the state of their equipment after the storm, or to secure the gear in the supply box, while 2 of them, Marshall and Duckett, were on the landing stage. A massive, unexpected wave surged up and swept them into the sea. The 3rd man, MacArthur, who had been higher up the path, rushed down to help his comrades and was claimed by the next monstrous wave. A common historical fact is that rogue waves, once considered maritime myth, are now a well-documented phenomenon. They are massive, spontaneous waves that can be more than twice the size of the surrounding seas and can appear without warning, even in relatively calm conditions. Muirhead's theory, therefore, had a basis in scientific possibility. He proposed that MacArthur, being the last to go out, was the one who had time to grab his oilskins, while Duckett and Marshall, perhaps already near the door, rushed out without theirs when they saw something amiss. The overturned chair was explained as one of the men getting up hastily. The half-eaten meal, he concluded, must have belonged to the man left inside, who then rushed out to join the others. This explanation is neat, dramatic, and plausible. It accounts for the missing men, the damage on the West Landing, and, with a bit of a stretch, the oilskins. It became the official story, the one recorded in the Northern Lighthouse Board's records. The board concluded that the men had been accidentally drowned while in the performance of their duties. It was a tragic accident, a testament to the awesome and unpredictable power of the sea. Case closed. It provides a rational, natural explanation for an event that seemed to defy logic. There are no ghosts, no monsters, no madness, just water, wind, and bad luck. It's a comforting explanation, in a way. It places the blame on an impersonal force of nature, absolving the men of any fault and silencing the more lurid and supernatural theories that were already beginning to circulate. A weird fact: Muirhead's report made a point of criticizing the keepers for not securing the ropes at the landing stage, suggesting this dereliction of duty might have led to the accident. This was later seen by many, including the keepers' families, as an attempt to shift a small amount of blame onto the victims, perhaps to protect the board from any hint of liability. Historians still debate the motivations behind Muirhead's conclusions. Was he genuinely convinced by the evidence of the rogue wave, or was he under pressure to provide a quick, tidy explanation to quell public speculation and close a painful chapter for the Lighthouse Board? The official story is logical, but as you stand on that windswept island, it feels just a little too simple, a little too clean to account for the deep well of strangeness you've discovered. The official explanation, the rogue wave theory, is like a sturdy, sensible coat. It covers the basics and seems to offer adequate protection from the storm of speculation. But when you look closely, you start to see that the coat doesn't quite fit. There are holes in the fabric, inconsistencies that nag at the mind and refuse to go away. Let's put that coat on and see where it feels tight. You're standing in the cold kitchen again, looking at the scene. The official theory requires you to believe that on a calm day, after a major storm, two experienced keepers rushed out of the lighthouse without their essential protective gear. Why? The theory suggests they saw something wrong at the landing stage, but what could be so urgent on a calm day that they wouldn't take 30 seconds to grab their oilskins? These men lived by the rhythm of the sea. They understood its dangers better than anyone. It feels out of character, a detail that the rogue wave theory has to awkwardly shuffle past. Then there's the bigger problem, the logbook. The official theory completely ignores, or at least dismisses, the bizarre entries describing the phantom storm and the keeper's profound fear. Muirhead himself suggested the entries were written by one man succumbing to madness, but there's no evidence for that. If you take the logbook at face value, the men vanished on or after December 15th, a day the log itself describes as calm. How does a rogue wave of such impossible size appear out of a calm sea? While it's technically possible, it stretches credulity. The theory requires you to believe that the most terrifying storm in the keeper's experience was a hallucination, but the wave that supposedly killed them was real. It's asking you to pick and choose which parts of the evidence to believe. This is a significant inconsistency. The story told by the logbook and the story told by the rogue wave theory are two different narratives that cannot comfortably coexist. One must be false. But which one? Let's go down to the western landing, where Muirhead found his crucial evidence. Yes, there was damage. Bent railings, a smashed supply crate. But critics of the official theory point out that this damage could have been inflicted during the severe gales that were known to have occurred before December 15th, the very storm that the logbook describes in such terrifying terms. The damage doesn't necessarily prove that the men were there when it happened. Furthermore, it was common practice for keepers to stay securely inside the lighthouse compound during such storms. The idea that all three men would go down to one of the most exposed parts of the island, 150 feet below the safety of the tower, during or immediately after a severe storm, goes against every rule and every instinct of their profession. A common historical fact about lighthouse operation is that safety protocols were drilled into keepers relentlessly. The rule to never venture out in a storm, and never alone, was paramount. For all three men to break this fundamental rule at the same time is highly unlikely. And what about the clues inside the lighthouse that the official theory struggles to explain? The half-eaten meal on the table, the overturned chair. The rogue wave theory suggests this was the last man, hastily, getting up to join his friends in peril. But the cold fireplace and the stopped clock suggest the abandonment happened days, not minutes, before the discovery. It feels like trying to solve a jigsaw puzzle where the pieces come from two different boxes. The sudden departure pieces, like the chair and the meal, don't fit with the long abandonment pieces, like the clock and the cold grate. It's a timeline problem that the official explanation just papers over. It's like a detective declaring a case solved when half the clues on the board don't fit the chosen suspect. You're left with a nagging sense of dissatisfaction, the feeling that the real story is being ignored. Here's a quirky and often unmentioned detail that casts further doubt. The ropes. At both the east and west landing stages, the mooring ropes, used to help secure the boats, were all found neatly coiled and stowed. If the men had been swept away while working at the landing, or in the process of responding to an emergency there, wouldn't the ropes have been in use? Wouldn't they be trailing in the water, or at least uncoiled and ready? The fact that they were put away properly suggests that whatever the men were doing, it probably wasn't maintenance on the landing gear. It's another small, quiet detail that contradicts the official narrative. Historians still debate the validity of Muirhead's investigation itself. Was he a neutral observer piecing together the facts? Or was he an insider tasked with creating a plausible, non-scandalous narrative to protect the reputation of the Northern Lighthouse Board? The board had a vested interest in portraying the event as a tragic but understandable accident, rather than something involving madness, murder, or negligence. The rogue wave theory was, if nothing else, convenient. But convenience is not the same as truth. The doubts and inconsistencies remain, swirling around the official story like the mists around Eilean Mor, refusing to be burned away by the simple light of a single explanation. Once you start pulling at the loose threads of the official story, the entire fabric begins to unravel. And when rational explanations fail, the human mind naturally drifts towards the irrational, the fantastical, the supernatural. This is where the story of the Flannan Isles lighthouse keepers leaves the realm of a simple maritime tragedy and enters the world of folklore and ghost stories. Let's be clear. We are now leaving the solid ground of evidence and wading into the deep, murky waters of speculation. But in a mystery this profound, speculation is all we have left. So let's explore the whispers, the more outlandish theories that have clung to this story for over a century. One of the most enduring theories is that the men ran afoul of the island's ancient, pre-Christian inhabitants, the little people or fairies of Hebridean lore. Remember the ruins of St. Flannan's Chapel and the strange rituals the shepherds performed? These rituals were born from a deep-seated belief that the island was a sacred and dangerous place. According to this line of thinking, the keepers, in their rigid modern world of science and engineering, may have inadvertently desecrated a cheated sacred spot or broken some ancient taboo. Perhaps they disturbed the chapel ruins, or, as the old superstition warned, they harmed one of the island's seabirds. The terrifying, localized storm described in the logbook could then be interpreted, not as a weather event, but as a supernatural assault, a magical tempest conjured by angry spirits to drive the intruders mad. A crying of Donald MacArthur, the praying of all three men. This wasn't fear of wind and water, but terror of something otherworldly. In this version of the story, the men weren't washed away, they were taken, lured out of the lighthouse by spectral voices or terrifying apparitions, and led to their doom over the cliff edge. It's a wonderfully spooky tale, turning our keepers into the protagonists of a folk horror story. It sounds ridiculous to our modern ears, but to the people of the Western Isles in 1900, a world where belief in the supernatural was still deeply woven into the fabric of daily life, this theory would have felt frighteningly plausible. Then there are the theories that drift even further from shore, into the realm of what we'd now call ufology or cryptozoology. Some have proposed that the men were abducted by an alien spacecraft. The storm in the logbook could be reinterpreted as the sound and fury of a descending UFO, and the men's fear as a natural reaction to a close encounter of the most terrifying kind. It's a theory that conveniently explains the lack of bodies and the sudden, inexplicable nature of the disappearance. A slightly more grounded, but still fantastical theory suggests an encounter with a sea monster. The North Atlantic has always been a source of legends about giant sea serpents and krakens. Could the keepers have witnessed some massive, unknown creature rising from the depths? Could it have been this sight that drove MacArthur to tears and the others to prayer? Perhaps the creature even attacked the island, its massive form accounting for the damage to the western landing. It's the stuff of a Jules Verne novel, an exciting and terrifying alternative to the mundane explanation of a wave, a common historical. Fact is that sightings of sea serpents were surprisingly common in the 19th and early 20th centuries, often reported by credible witnesses, like naval officers and fishermen. While modern science dismisses most of these as misidentified whales or giant squid, the belief in them was very real at the time. Let's not forget the possibility of a foreign power. Some of the more paranoid theories suggested the men were kidnapped by spies or agents from another country who wanted to learn the secrets of the British lighthouse system. In this spy thriller version of events, a foreign boat or even a submarine could have landed secretly on the island, abducted the keepers, and spirited them away for interrogation, leaving the scene staged to look like an accident. This theory, while seeming outlandish now, would have resonated in an era of rising geopolitical tensions in Europe. It provides a human culprit, but one that is external and mysterious. However, there is zero evidence to support this. No government ever claimed responsibility, and no intelligence records have ever surfaced to give it any credence. It remains firmly in the realm of conspiracy theory, much like modern theories about planes being captured by secret government tech. And now for a weird, specific supernatural belief from the region. There's a particular ghoulish spirit in Scottish folklore known as a kelp-ie, or water horse, a shape-shifting creature that haunts lochs and seas, often appearing as a beautiful horse to lure victims onto its back before dragging them to a watery grave. Could the keepers have been lured out by such a phantasm? Historians still debate the extent to which these folk beliefs were genuinely held by the keepers themselves. Were men like Duckett, Marshall, and MacArthur, as employees of a rational, scientific organization like the Northern Lighthouse Board, still susceptible to the old ways of thinking? Or were these superstitions something they would have dismissed, With a laugh? We can't know for sure, but in the crushing isolation and psychological stress of Alan Moore, it's possible that the line between the real and the unreal could begin to blur. These fantastical theories, from angry fairies to sea monsters to alien abduction, persist because they offer a story that is as big and as strange as the disappearance itself. A simple wave feels too small, an answer for such a large and silent void. After exploring the whispers of the supernatural, let's pull ourselves back to the world of human fallibility. The official story blames nature. The fantastical theories blame monsters or spirits. But there's another category of explanation, one that is perhaps the most tragic and disturbing of all, that the cause of the disappearance was not external, but internal. That the answer lies not in the sea or the sky, but in the hearts and minds of the three men themselves. We must now consider the dark possibility of murder and suicide. You are back in that small, claustrophobic living space. Three men, cooped, up together for weeks on end. The relentless wind, the isolation, the grating personal habits. It's a pressure cooker. We know that Donald MacArthur had a reputation as a volatile man, a brawler. Is it possible that tensions on the island finally boiled over? Let's construct a grim scenario. An argument breaks out. Maybe it's over a trivial matter, a disagreement that escalates wildly in the confined space. MacArthur, with his quick temper, snaps. A fight ensues. In this version, MacArthur kills his two companions, Ducat and Marshall, inside the lighthouse. The overturned chair could be a sign of this struggle. Overcome with guilt and horror at what he has done, MacArthur then cleans up the scene as best he can, writes the bizarre logbook entries to cover his tracks and suggest a supernatural event, and then, donning his own oilskins, walks to the cliff edge and throws himself into the churning sea below. This theory explains the lack of bodies. They are all at the bottom of the Atlantic. It explains the missing set of oilskins. It provides a reason for the strange log entries. They are the work of a guilty and possibly unhinged mind. It's a dark, compelling narrative. It feels like something out of a Poe story, a tale of madness and murder in a lonely tower. However, like all the other theories, this one has its own problems. There were no signs of a violent struggle found in the lighthouse. The place was noted for its neatness, not for being the scene of a double homicide. While a fight could have occurred without leaving much mess, it seems unlikely. More importantly, the characters of the other men don't fit. James Ducat was known as a calm and peaceable family man. Thomas Marshall was a diligent professional. It's hard to imagine them getting into a fatal brawl. And while MacArthur had a reputation, it was for fighting on the docks, fueled by drink and company. There's no evidence he was a violent man. In a sober, professional setting, a common historical fact is that the Northern Lighthouse Board vetted its keepers carefully. While MacArthur was an occasional, they would have been unlikely to place a man they considered dangerously unstable in such a high-stress, isolated post. They needed reliability above all else. Let's flip the script. What if MacArthur wasn't the aggressor, but the victim? Perhaps Ducat and Marshall, driven mad by the isolation or by MacArthur's grating personality, conspired to murder him. They could have thrown him from the cliffs, and then, in a fit of remorse or a pact of suicide, followed him into the sea. This scenario is even less likely, given their known characters, but in the absence of evidence, anything is possible. The psychological pressure of the job was immense. A condition known as lighthouse fever or cabin fever was recognized. Risk, where the isolation and monotony could lead to depression, paranoia, and irrational behavior. A quirky, related fact: some lighthouses in the 19th century were built with circular rooms and staircases specifically to avoid corners where, it was believed, the devil or evil spirits could hide and also to prevent arguments, as no one could. B. Cornered. It's a sign of how seriously the psychological aspects of the job were taken. The Flannan Isles Lighthouse, with its square rooms and sharp corners, clearly missed that design memo. This brings us to the final, and perhaps saddest, human explanation. What if there was no murder, but a shared psychological break? What if the phantom storm in the logbook was real to them? A shared delusion, a folie à trois, brought on by the immense stress and the relentless, maddening sound of the wind and waves. In this state of collective psychosis, they could have believed the sea was calling to them, or that some terrible beast was coming for them, and in their terror, they fled the lighthouse and plunged to their deaths. Historians still debate the psychological impact of long-term exposure to low-frequency sound, like the kind produced by wind and waves crashing against cliffs. Could the infrasound on Eilean Mor have had a disorienting or even psychosis-inducing effect on the keepers? Over time, it's a modern scientific lens on an old mystery, suggesting that the haunting of the island might have been auditory. In this theory, the men were not killed by a wave or by each other, but by the island itself, its oppressive atmosphere, its soul-crushing loneliness, and the very sound it made. This explanation is profoundly tragic. It suggests that their minds, the one thing they had to rely on, betrayed them. It turns the story from a mystery into a cautionary tale about the limits of human endurance. Whether by wave, madness, or murder, the result is the same: an empty lighthouse, a silent logbook, and 3 families left to wonder forever what happened to their loved ones on that lonely, unforgiving rock. So where does that leave us? We've walked the windy cliffs of Eilean Mor. We've stood in the cold, silent rooms of the lighthouse. And we've sifted through a century of clues, theories, and speculation. We have the official story of the rogue wave, a neat but flawed explanation. We have the dark human dramas of murder and madness. And we have the fantastical tales of spirits and monsters. The truth is, we are no closer to a definitive answer than Captain Joseph Moore was when he first set foot on that silent shore in 1900. Mystery of the Flannan Isles endures precisely because it is a perfect void. There are just enough clues to fuel endless speculation, but not enough to provide a conclusive answer. Every theory you try to build eventually collapses under the weight of a contradictory detail. It's a puzzle with no solution, a story with no final chapter. The fate of the lighthouse itself continues. After the disappearance, it could not simply be abandoned. It was too vital a navigational aid. A new crew of keepers was brought in. Brave men who had to live and work in the very rooms where their colleagues had vanished, forever haunted by the story. You can only imagine the fear they must have felt during the first big storm, the way they must have listened to the wind, wondering if they were hearing the same phantom tempest that Marshall described in the log. Life on Eilean Mor was never the same. The shadow of the mystery was now a permanent resident. A common historical fact is that the Flannan Isles Lighthouse remained a manned station for another 70 years. Generation after generation of keepers lived out their 6-week rotations on the rock, each one a custodian of both the light and its terrible secret. They were professional to a fault, but the story was always there, a whisper in the quiet moments of the night watch. Eventually, technology provided a final, impersonal solution. In 1971, the lighthouse was automated. The keepers were no longer needed. The living quarters you explored, the kitchen where the last meal sat uneaten, were locked, up and left to the silence. The magnificent Fresnel lens, with its intricate clockwork, was replaced by a bright, efficient, and soulless automated beacon, powered by batteries and monitored from a control room hundreds of miles away on the mainland. The human element was finally and permanently removed from Eilean Mor. There would be no more keepers to go mad, No more men to be swept away by the sea. The island was returned to the birds and the wind. A strange fact about the automation is that the original priceless Fresnel lens, the one the lost keepers so meticulously polished, was removed and now sits in a museum, a silent, beautiful artifact from a bygone era of lighthouse keeping. It's a ghost of glass and brass, a reminder of the human hands that once tended it. And so, our story ends where it began, with a light in the darkness. If you were to sail past the Flannan Isles tonight, you would still see it. A bright, steady flash piercing the gloom. But it is a different kind of light now. It's a ghost light, a machine's pulse. It keeps the ships safe, but it holds no stories. The warmth, the life, the humanity is gone. The tower stands, a white, silent monument on an empty island, its secret held forever by the deep, cold waters of the surrounding sea. Historians still debate every facet of this case, from the logbook's authenticity to the meaning of the oilskins, and they likely always will. The Flannan Isles mystery has become a modern myth, a campfire story for the maritime world, a chilling reminder that for all our technology and all our reason, there are still places in the world where people can simply disappear, leaving behind nothing but questions that echo eternally in the wind. The light keeps its watch, silent and alone, a beacon with a story it can no longer tell. And so, the automated light continues its lonely vigil, flashing out over the dark, indifferent waves of the North Atlantic. The wind still scours the high cliffs of Ailyn Moor, and the gannets still cry their timeless, mournful calls into the salt-laced air. The stone buildings of the lighthouse compound stand empty. The rooms where Duckett, Marshall, and MacArthur lived and worked now just hollow spaces, gathering dust and silence. The mystery remains, sealed within the island's stony heart, a perfect, unsolved riddle. The sea keeps its secrets well, but that story is far away now. Let the image of that lonely island begin to fade, like a photograph sinking into deep water. Let the sound of the wind and the waves soften, replaced by the gentle, steady hum of the fan in your own quiet room. You are safe, you are warm, and you are far from the cold shores of the North Atlantic. The only watch you need to keep tonight is the one that leads you into the peaceful realm of your own rest. Let go of the questions, let go of the chill of the mystery, and just feel the comfortable weight of your blankets. Allow your breathing to slow, to find its own easy rhythm, in and out. Just relax now, and let the last whispers of our story lull you gently, gently towards sleep.